One slide?
Yeah. One slide. I want to just talk a bit about stuff. I want to maybe talk about instilling behaviors, not necessarily projects that I'm conducting right now, but more a mindset for teachers in general. So I want to talk a bit about how we can do little things, nano steps, not micro steps, but nano steps. And it starts with attitudes in the classroom that basically work around three main actions and put their three action verbs basically. So I want to look at that basically and use that as an experience, right? To encourage other teachers to do the same. Because this is what we can do when we want to get students to think globally. And the word glocal I've been hearing it a lot in a lot of Twitter chats. Just to introduce myself, can I introduce myself? Can I get started? Is that it?
Yes, go ahead.
Yep. All right, great. So I'm really, really glad to be able to participate in this ELT, day for Puerto Rico. And as everybody's already said, Stephan Hughes is my name. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, but I've been residing in Brazil for the last 23 years. So yeah, I hope we can do a little stuff here and talk. After such a wonderful presentation by Olenka, I want now to switch to as I said to Rob about behaviors. And this, I think, the best thing we can do with our students is modeling and doing things in the classroom that get students to think about the way they act, the way they learn, and apply learning. Try to find ways to apply learning. A lot of times, our students may ask us, "But why am I learning all of this? And what does it have to do with the real world or the world that I'm going to face?" So I think one of the challenges, that's why I put there, ask, explore, and think, is to get students, to encourage students to think about how they can apply what they are learning to the real world, right? And it also has to do with thinking of their passions, thinking of what drives them, thinking of what motivates them in their everyday experience. Um, I want to think of maybe I like talking about some quotes. I have a few quotes that I use to talk about being global and acting global, and glocal. This is a combination of global and local, right? Martin Luther King Jr. talks a lot about, with several ideas of freedom and justice. And he says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In this quote, you see it embodies the idea of us thinking of the fact of what we do in our microcosm affects the world, can affect the world. And we want to get students to think like that all the time. Just yesterday, I participated in a chat on Twitter. It's for new teachers to Twitter called NT2, number two, T. And we talked about global mindedness. We want to get if you want to get some definitions of what global mindedness is, um, it has to do with, and I will give you a quick definition here, right? Global mindedness has to do with getting students to think of what they do and how it connects to the rest of the world, or what it connects to where they live, their neighborhood, their city, their state, their country, right? And what is also interesting is that sometimes when we think of global, we think, okay, just the world. But a lot of times our students are not even aware of things that happen around them. So that's why I say act locally and think globally, right? And this slide, that's why I just chose one slide to talk about that. Because when you think of acting locally and you look at what happens and when you think of, okay, how can I maybe, let's say, renovate a building? How can I help people who live on my street? How can I maybe change the school that I'm living in? How can I maybe change what's happening in my community? And if everybody does that, it multiplies. You see, there's a domino effect. And I think this is what we want to look at, grassroots actions that, that can help everybody develop. Right. So that's why I focus on those three main questions. So when I say ask questions that lead to more questions, it's getting students to think, okay, um, what happens? Do you think what happens in our culture, what happens in our classroom, the way our classrooms are built, the way we do things at our school. All schools like that. So when we get students just ask, it's not just asking simple yes no questions or getting them to find answers that they can always check on Google. It's about getting them to really, really think and think about questions that may not always have immediate answers, not even answers that you have as a teacher. So it's why about asking questions that lead to more questions, that lead to more ideas, and also lead to them maybe exploring those questions further, right? Of course, we have a school syllabus, we have things that we have to follow, but if you can give your students a little more leeway and get them to, imagine things, getting them to maybe think a bit about, okay, I want to maybe explore, and if you think, okay, we're going back to what happened in Puerto Rico in natural disasters. Sometimes, okay, we learn this in school, but what happens in a natural disaster? Just last week, I had a student ask me here in Brazil, have you ever been in an earthquake? And I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. We sometimes do, we've had earthquakes, but not the magnitude of what happened in Haiti or in Puerto Rico. And explaining that to the student, yeah, they might not necessarily understand it, but getting them to understand from a different perspective. So opening up that and I asking them these questions, not the questions that is in the book, but what's it like to be in an earthquake, and is it always what they say it's like? The instructions that they give you. You talk about disaster preparedness. You talk about prevention. So how can we prepare for this an earthquake? How can you prepare for a hurricane? How can you prepare for somebody invading your school and attacking? How can you prepare for other kinds of situations that require you to think out of the box? You see, so these are things that I want to mean by ask questions that lead to more questions. Okay, another definition for global mindedness, let me give you another quick definition, right? And I'm going to put it here, is understanding where you fit in the larger global, sociological, and geopolitical realm. You see the different ideas going on here. It's connecting your everyday life to the world, right? And when I get the idea of global, sometimes the students who, as a lot of us know sometimes, our students who sometimes have never even left their own hometown. So a lot of times, and I teach English to Brazilians, and a lot of these students, they use course materials which are imported, and they're questions about things that are happening in other parts of the world, and they may not have even left their own hometown. So how can I ask them about things that happen in Paris or in New York or in Sydney if they've never even, if say they live in the countryside, they've never been to Rio de Janeiro where I'm based? You see, so sometimes global can be going out of their hometown and get them to see around things sometimes, right? That's why it's local and global at the same time, right? We live in a global village, and that's what goes back to this idea of the global village. And exploring possibilities that go beyond the syllabus. Okay, there are things, there are competencies, there are skills the students need to acquire, but again, if we can go up to the big question, right? I'll give you a quick example again. Here in Rio, specifically in the state of Rio, we've been having trouble the last, let's say, 10, 20 days with water. The sewage that's been treated has not been well treated, and the water that's coming through the pipes, it's been terrible smell. The color, you can see that there has been a lot of problems going in there. But we go back to the big questions. Getting students to ask big questions. What is not just the fact that we're not treating the water, but what are the alternatives to maybe sewage treatment? How can we prevent that? Where is this water treated? How do they dispose of sewage? Where does it go directly? And the more that journalists discovered this, was that the water was being the sewage, sorry, was being disposed directly into the rivers, into the streams. So you get students, yeah, Ipanema was saying, right? You get students to think, well, why? How can we change that? You see, so it's not just the fact that okay, there's let's say a problem that's on the spot, but what's behind the problem? What's the cause? So we can't just think of immediate solutions, but thinking of our own actions. And also, it goes back to responsibility. We see a lot of times, a lot of citizens, they do not dispose of their own waste. And this waste, sometimes you talk about, refrigerators, old tires, furniture and stuff, is disposed, thrown directly into the rivers. This goes into the open sea, and we have contaminated water. Right. So you can't. It's not just the government's fault. It's not just the water treatment, authorities. It's everybody's problem. So getting them to think like that is important, right? And that's what leads to the next one about thinking of the impact our actions have on others. So the fact that I dispose of my waste inappropriately, I think, well, no, that's not a big deal. A lot of times students say, well, that's why we have street people, street cleaning, that's their job. But hey, if I think about that a little better, I will understand that this is what impacts on everybody. And that's thinking globally because it's local and global at the same time, right? So this is basically what I wanted to share with you. But again, I was talking about attitudes, mindsets, and behaviors. And we can do this with our students by doing those three things every day, simply going beyond the syllabus so that they can, take things to another level, of course, and take things into their own hands. So we talk a lot about agency, but this is how we get agency going. All right, that's it. I think my 10 minutes is up, right?